All right, Pastor, this really isn't for you to hear me. He knows that I'm a loud individual. I come by that honestly. My father was told many times he had a radio voice, but it has been a blessing to get to know your pastor a little bit, see him at camp, and of course the Herds and the Salstroms are also at camp, and hear your pastor preach at camp. I really enjoy his preaching. That was the stuff you wanted me to say to get a love offering, right? Okay. All right. So a little more tonight. Don't want to do it all at once, spread it out. I am Mike Marshall, missionary in the military with Armed Forces Baptist Missions. I've called so many pastors I don't really know how to start a conversation other than that. You can imagine, calling people and now, who are you? And repeat that over and over and over again to the secretary and then to the assistant pastor and to the pastor. But it is interesting being a missionary to the military, and I'll tell you a little bit more about my testimony tonight as I preach. But the military is a mission field that people just assume someone's out there reaching. My dad used to say, people say, oh, well, our son or daughter is going to the military. They will take care of them spiritually. And he says, who is the they? There is no they. And I want to be the they, but I'm only an I. So I'll be an I, not a they. I'm going to go ahead and play this video now. And if you can't see it or you can't hear it, just move on up. You might give your pastor a heart attack if there's other people in the front row, but you know what? I'm sure somebody will be willing to drive him to the hospital.
Hello, my name is Doug Carriger, and I'm the General Director of Armed Forces Baptist Missions. I want to thank you for taking the opportunity to watch this video and prayerfully considering supporting this ministry.
See where that green thing is right there? Fire burst the machine gun. Go high, low, right there. There you got it. Easy with it now. Easy with it. Easy with it. Easy with it.
You're at war with the most dangerous enemy that has ever faced mankind.
Good. Take a lot of hands.
These words describe the men and women in uniform who fight for our freedom across the globe. They are deployed to nearly 500 bases in 80 countries around the world. Although the United States meets their physical needs better than any country in the world, often their souls go unguarded. AFBM is dedicated to meeting the spiritual needs of these soldiers. Tasked with a worldwide mission, AFBM seeks to turn the souls of men and women in uniform and their families to the saving grace of Jesus Christ. To do this, AFBM developed an effective strategy for ministry. We first worked to plant churches outside military bases around the world. Then, we partner with these and other existing local churches, encouraging them to develop a military evangelistic outreach program. In these churches, AFBM works to establish military service centers, an ideal means for reaching young, single military personnel.
I'm very grateful for the Servicemen Center. Not only did I get saved there, but I also met my wife, who was the daughter of the director of the Servicemen Center. So thank you.
We use these centers to train believers as soul winners and Bible teachers, turning them into evangelists. We supply them with Bibles and tracts and encourage them to sow the seed of the gospel in their places of duty. In churches near veterans' homes or hospitals, AFBM strives to effectively minister to veterans. With our military returning from active conflict, God has opened new doors for AFBM to minister. The U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs estimates that 1 in 5 soldiers returning from the war in Afghanistan suffers from PTSD. That number doubles for Iraqi war veterans, and 60% of Vietnam veterans have PTSD. The number of PTSD cases continues to rise, and AFBM has been able to provide support for these soldiers.
Hello, my name is Charlie, and I would just like to say thank you to Brother Carringer for writing the book, Wounded Spirits. It was definitely a godsend. I'm a veteran who served in Iraq and Afghanistan and has dealt with PTSD for many years. I had many problems, including thoughts of suicide.
My time in Vietnam is part of me. There's not much I can do about that. But with your book and the Bible, I'm working on changing the effects that PTSD has on me.
I was diagnosed with PTSD and mild depression. The hope I found as a child of God was amazing. The Lord gave me His strength through His Word, which has the answer to man's problems.
Through Scripture, Wounded Spirits showed me that God has control of my life and my PTSD. If you know any veteran or anybody that suffers from PTSD, I recommend Wounded Spirits.
AFBM missionaries lead Bible studies on and near military bases. They open their homes to servicemen, offering meals and developing relationships. Wherever possible, AFBM also works to assist the families of both the veteran and the deployed. Through these, they can minister one-on-one to the heroes who defend our country. If, like us, God has given you a burden for the U.S. Armed Forces, there is something you can do. We need churches to support our missionaries to the military. We can provide missionaries and evangelists for revivals and missions conferences, but we need local churches to provide locations and follow up. We need missionaries called by God to labor for God in the field of the military. We need home office supporters. We need Bibles and tracts. Every month, AFBM sends thousands of Bibles and tracts around the world. You can pray that Christ will have the preeminence in our ministry.
I want to assure those of you that are considering the support of an AFBM missionary, or those of you who currently support AFBM missionaries, that we are here for you. Do not hesitate to contact us if you have questions or suggestions. We count it a privilege to serve together to reach the military for Christ.
Flight Alpha Foxtrot 34, this is Hotel Quebec Asia, over.
Hotel Quebec Asia, this is Flight Alpha Foxtrot 34, carrying 345 of heroes back to their families after 14 months. Please transmit, over.
Flight Alpha Foxtrot 34, this is Hotel Quebec Asia. Let the heroes know you have cleared enemy territory and we have their backs. Someone smiling down, Godspeed and good thoughts for a smooth flight to take care of those heroes. Hotel Quebec Asia, out.
Hotel Quebec Asia, this is Flight Alpha 34. We let them know they're safe and we're sending appreciation from shouting heroes. We owe you one, Hotel Quebec, over.
Flight Alpha 34, we owe them everything. Over and out.
Well, if that didn't do anything for you, there's some coffee out there. You need to go get some because you're probably not awake. Last night, you climbed into your bed, secure, safe, because someone is out there keeping you that way. By the time you crawl into your bed tonight, someone who has sacrificed part of their life to protect you will commit suicide because of the things they've seen. One a day. One veteran a day commits suicide because they don't have the hope that we have. And sure, there are Christians that commit suicide, but it's very much lower than those who you see come back and don't have anyone to turn to, don't have any reason to keep going. They don't understand what they're going through or why they need to press on. And so there's three main reasons, and this is the first time I've done Sunday school and evening service, so I'm trying to get my thoughts all in order and how that needs to go. But there's three main reasons why we do military ministry. You know, some people, like I said, think, oh, military ministry just kind of takes care of itself. There's chaplains and there's a lot of churches out there, and it'll be all right. But the first reason is that the military, they're just people. They're just people like you and me. They have needs like you and I do. But it's not just a handful of people. It's not just a company of soldiers. How many of you have ever heard of Bahrain? How many have ever heard of Kosovo? The island of Palau? I know 2 missionaries that are there. The amount of active duty military is larger than any of those countries. And we send missionaries there because where there's people, there needs to be the gospel. The military is difficult because they travel around, but they travel from one base to another, so we always know what they're getting done. But instead of saying, I want to reach this soul, and I'm going to go and work on that soul, I have to say, I'm going to go reach this installation. And everybody that comes through, I have an opportunity to share the gospel with them. The second reason for military ministry is, frankly, we never know when we could be sending our boys and girls into a battle zone. And we might not have another opportunity for them to hear the gospel. You know, we do hear of people who receive Christ in their 70s, their 80s, their 90s, after years of saying no, and we praise the Lord for those, but for many people in the military, that's not going to be a reality. They're going to go and they're going to lay down their life to protect our precious freedom in this country. And I want to take the more precious freedom that we have in the gospel of Jesus Christ to them before they have to be put in that situation to make that sacrifice. The third reason is, frankly, they make really good church members. How many of you served in the military? Yeah, you have 2. Military people know the chain of command, Pastor. They know that God's in charge, and He's got you leading things around here. They're willing to jump in and help out. You know, tell me what to do, Pastor. Where can I help? Where can I serve? Unless they're in the Navy, and then they learn that Navy stands for never again volunteer yourself. But my dad's in the Navy, and he liked poking fun at that. But really, it's a country bigger than many countries we often send missionaries to, and it's behind barbed wire and guarded gates. And you look at the country of North Korea, who's behind barbed wire and guarded gates. Well, we can't get in there, but we can get in to reach the military. Even though there are obstacles, the Lord has provided doors to be able to get in and to find ways to minister through wounded spirits to those with PTSD, and to be able to preach the gospel, hold Bible studies, and things like that. The pastor mentioned that I have been doing stuff, and so I'll give you part of my testimony now. I was born at a young age. The rest of you will get that later. And I was born into a pastor's home. When I was 10, my parents decided to go into military missions. My dad had been doing some stuff on the side, to some trips to Russia and Korea, and decided that he couldn't pastor and do military missions at the same time, and so he asked the Lord which one he wanted to do. And he said, it's time for a change. So they went into military missions. So people ask me, were you ever in the military? Or what branch were you in? I say, I was in the Lord's Army. Because I grew up in military missions. By the time I was 10, my parents began deputation, but at the same time, we're doing military ministry. Now, that's not the wisest way to go about raising your support, to be on the field and doing it. That's what they did, and that's what I'm doing. So, I guess dumb runs in the family. But, so I remember at the age of 11, driving around on Great Lakes Naval Base, sticking my head out of a 15-passenger van saying, hey, mister, you want to go to church? And someone would say yes, someone would say no. But it didn't matter. We kept on doing it until the regulations changed and we couldn't do that anymore. Then we found other ways to invite people to church and get the word out. Back in 2012, I went to a meeting at Great Lakes Naval Base for clergy, and I met the command chaplain, which we had never, for some reason, never been able to meet before. And we had planted a church in 2009 to try to reach Great Lakes Naval Base. And I asked the chaplain, I said, hey, there's some things that we'd like to do. Tell me what you think about this. We'd like to run a vacation Bible school here for the military personnel and for their kids. What would you think about that? He goes, oh, we've wanted to have a VBS. We just haven't had the personnel. We'd love to have you do that. Okay. My mom would like to do Bible studies for military women and spouses. Could she do that here in the chapel? Oh, that sounds like a great idea. Let us know what days you want to do it. Okay. We have these dinners that we put on to appreciate military spouses, and and we feed them, and we give them a gift, and we also preach the gospel. And I said, could we do those here in the chapel? Oh yeah, I've seen those before. That'd be great. I'm sure the commander would love that. Everything I asked him, he said yes, that'd be great. We can do that. We can make that work. And I walked out of the meeting saying, Lord, where did those words come from? I'm not smart enough to come up with all that stuff. And then later down the road, we switched to neighborhood Bible time, which, if you're not familiar with that, it's like VBS on steroids, where you have these two evangelists come in, and they're all excited, and they get the kids all riled up, and then you have a teen rally in the evening, where about 3 teens get killed every night, playing big ball and tackle games stuff. Our mantra, is it's not a successful youth activity until someone gets hurt. But we've been able to do that this year. When we did neighborhood Bible time, we saw 13 saved down at Great Lakes Naval Base. We had, well, if you ask the Navy, we had about 450 in attendance because they add it cumulative. So we had 54 was our high for kids, and I think 22 for teenagers, and seven of those teenagers got saved. And I had never sat in a room before counseling someone for salvation and hear him say, I just don't know. My cousin died, and I know he's in hell, and it should have been me. What do you say to that? And we took him to the rich young ruler, and he said, I've done so many bad things. And I said, well, let's look at Paul. And these military teenagers, you don't hear a lot about military families getting in trouble and that sort of thing, because they don't try to publicize that, but they have just as many struggles as the teenagers in your towns. In fact, they have more. I heard a statistic recently that if you can avoid it, you should not even change homes from the time your kids are 13 to 18. And these families move every 2 to 3 years. And it disrupts the lives of their kids, and they try to adjust, and they end up with the wrong friends. And they're very susceptible to anybody who will show them acceptance. Because maybe dad's deployed for a year and mom is just trying to deal with everything, and the families struggle so much. But they have their own community. You don't hear about it because they talk about themselves, and they keep everything close-knit because those are the people they can trust, the people that know what they're going through. And many churches don't realize that when a military family comes and sits in their pew, and he's wearing blue jeans and flannel like this brother down here, and she's got a smile on her face. No, they just look like good folk, and but inside there's so much going on that we don't realize. And so what God has burdened me to do is to take the things that I've learned working at Naval Station Great Lakes and take them around the world and plant military ministries. Last summer, as we were running neighborhood Bible time about Wednesday afternoon, you ever have those times where it seems like God's been giving you warning shots, and then he just takes it to 2x4 and goes dunk? Some people call it a light bulb moment, but for me it usually hurts a little more. But he was like, Mike, you need to take this other places. And I was like, oh, take neighborhood Bible time other places. Yeah, that'd be fun. Oh man, that'd be a fun life. Just run around and talk to chaplains and get these programs running. And the more I prayed about it and thought about it, the Lord was saying, no, you need to just take military ministry other places. You can include neighborhood Bible time if that works, but it's not going to work everywhere. But you need to go and reach more military installations with the gospel. And so sometimes that'll involve planting churches. Where I am going to Wagwon, South Korea, in Camp Carroll, we have a church planter there already. There was a church there. The missionary had to come off the field. People stopped coming little by little, and they were down to 5 people. He went back to replant that church. And he's been running between 25 and 30 last couple months. And so he's reaching Koreans as well as military personnel, but he doesn't have as much experience as I do dealing with the military. And he's had a chaplain that really wouldn't talk to him. And so we're praying that when I get my support and I get over there, together we'll be able to find the avenues that they view as needs for them, that we can reach the military. And so, well, how do you do that, Brother Marshall? Well, you heard in the video that we plant churches and we start servicemen centers and we counsel PTSD. But it's more than that. You know, we don't show up at the base and say, so, do you need a church, a serviceman center, or a counseling center? And then, oh, this one, okay, we'll start that. The military is supposed to be a self-contained organization. Everything's taken care of. Now, when you go to a base, the commander, his task is to take care of all of the needs of his men. That includes physical, emotional, spiritual. Well, he doesn't go to the galley and cook the eggs in the morning. He hires a chef to do that. He doesn't take care of the emotional problems. He says, I don't want to deal with that. We'll send him to a shrink. And he says, I'm not qualified to take care of spiritual problems. Let's get a chaplain. Please forgive me. I got a cold after 2 weeks of camp. Pastor Smart, he sends other people for 2 weeks, and he only goes 1 week. And so I'm just getting over that. I got everything pretty much back to normal except my voice. One thing I need. But we have to go in and we have to be investigators. We have to figure out what is lacking. I discovered, by asking the wrong questions, that at Great Lakes, it was manpower. They didn't have manpower. The Navy had been cutting their budgets, and so they couldn't have as many people in the chaplain's department, and they needed volunteers. And we said, we would love to volunteer and run a VBS. They said, great, that's something we can't do. But every base is different. They ran neighborhood Bible time at Fort Drum, New York this year, and there's 2 independent Baptist chaplains, the same Army post right now. And they ran it there, and the one chaplain's wife works in the religious education department, scheduling the programs. And so she and I had about half a dozen phone calls about saying, how do you do this? How did you make this work? And I found out that at Fort Drum, New York, they don't have a lack of volunteers. Now, their volunteers are all Army dependents, and some of them are Catholics, some of them are Pentecostals, some of them are Presbyterians, and but they want to help with the chapel programs. And so they have a harder time of figuring out how do we run a God-honoring Bible program where the person teaching the Bible story is going to be teaching what the Bible actually says. And but they had other openings where they have 400 to 500 kids on the post, and the chaplain said, yeah, well, we could very well start with 200 kids and end with 400. I'm like, wow, that's, we thought we were doing great, and we had 54 at one time. And so they have other doors. So everywhere I go, there are going to be different doors that are open, and the ones that I think are going to be open are probably going to be closed. But the Lord has prepared me through the things that I've experienced to be able to deal with those and to find ways to do military ministry. And sometimes you're going to go somewhere and you're going to work and try, and you're going to find out this base is closed right now. The Apostle Paul said, if they won't hear you, you dust off your feet and you go somewhere else. So my ministry is not one of being like a typical military ministry where I'm going to go and I'm going to start a serviceman center and I'm going to run it, or I'm going to go and plant a church and then have somebody else come and run the Serviceman Center. Mine is to go and plant military ministries. So in South Korea, it involves us planting a church. Other places, it's going to involve me working with an established local church that would love to have military in it, but they just don't know what to do. And I'll be able to go there and train people and meet with the chaplains and the commander and say, you know, we have a heart to help you accomplish your mission and to take care of the spiritual needs of the people at your facility. How can we do that and plug that church into every facet of ministry we can? So military ministry in itself is different from your traditional missionary, because a missionary goes over to the field and plants a church, and 5 years later he moves on and plants another church, and so on and so forth in many cases. And military ministry, you're usually staying, and instead of moving to different people, the people move past you. Well, mine is more like traditional missions, because I'm going to go and I'm going to start something and train people to run it, and I'm going to advance and move on and go to the next place and try to train people that are there all the time so they can catch men as they come through. At Great Lakes, it's the only boot camp the Navy has. Now, we can't really get into boot camp at the moment. They're pretty closed off there. But it's also the largest naval training center in the world. 60% of the schools are there. They leave boot camp and they go across the street, and they take electronics school, they take quartermaster school, they take firefighting school, lots of things. And my mother likes to describe it as standing at the base of Niagara Falls with a bucket. Have you ever been to Niagara Falls? It's a beautiful place, as there's a kid. But imagine standing at the base of Niagara Falls, or really any waterfall, with a little pail. And you can't quite reach the falls. You're catching drops here and there and trying to fill your bucket. And when you do, you realize your bucket has holes in it. And you have the water in your bucket for a little while, then it leaks out. And that's what it's like working at Great Lakes. We find people here and there, and there's so many coming by. That's the way all these military bases are. Which is why we need to have a ministry established, or more than one, at every military base around the world. So, if you could read the video from where you are, 471 military installations around the world. In, I think it said 40 countries. So I'm going to South Korea. There's several in South Korea. We have other missionaries with military ministries at these other places. There's places in Germany and Italy where we have people trying to start works. But there's so many military bases that do not have a concerted effort. Now, there are places where there are churches and they're close, and some people just go and they attend and they join while they're there. And that's great. But the church doesn't do anything to reach out to the military and to bring them in from the fields of sin, as it were. And so that's what I want to stir up a burden for in these churches, and to teach them how to do that and establish those ministries.